Joseph Spanjers is an economist at Global Financial Integrity in Washington, D.C. in the U.S. He joins us via Skype to talk about the ills of illicit financial outflows. Good evening, Joseph, and thank you so much for joining us. Give us your perspective on the issue of illicit financial outflows from Africa. How complex is this problem?
Yeah, illicit financial flows really are a key issue for African development, and it is a complex issue. As was mentioned, about 60% does come through commercial tax evasion, but it's a huge issue for Africa. Two of Africa's most important economies, Nigeria and South Africa, are in the top 10 sources of illicit capital worldwide. And as a percentage of GDP, Sub-Saharan Africa actually has the highest percentage of illicit financial outflows of any region in the developing world at 5.5%.
Now, Joseph, how much exactly are poorer nations losing?
So in terms of Sub-Saharan Africa, 68 billion flowed out in 2012, and that number has been rising since 2010. As well as over the course of from 2003 to 2012, there's over $500 billion lost.
Now, why are wealthy nations rejecting a plan to expand the UN's power to fight global tax evasion?
Well, what it comes down to is that generally developed countries like the money. So whether that money is coming in through tax havens by way of anonymous companies, there are a variety of channels that it can enter, but essentially it's money and we're accepting it in developed countries. However, we would characterize that as a short-sighted view, as it compromises the integrity of the financial system. It introduces new vulnerabilities. So we view that as a fairly short-sighted assessment of it.
Joseph, a widely held opinion by critics suggests that a planned register setting out the true owners of companies that is open to the public for scrutiny and not just to the tax authorities. Can this work? Is this doable?
So it is doable. It's been put into place in Denmark already. The United Kingdom is just starting it. That's just to name a couple of examples.
Which countries are the worst affected?
In terms of the worst affected, there are plenty of countries that really have large issues with these flows. As I mentioned before, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and in terms of volume, we're looking at South Africa and Nigeria as the two largest sources. But there's a number of other great examples that are, it's really, the numbers are fairly startling. So when you put these in terms of, say, illicit outflows per capita, the Republic of Congo has illicit outflows of $300 per citizen per year, Swaziland nearly $300, Liberia just under $200. If we're talking about, if we're going to compare it to spending on education, in Ethiopia, illicit financial outflows are 2.5 times the size of spending on education in the public sector. In Chad, that's 5 times. In Lesotho, it's twice as large. And if we're looking at comparing illicit outflows to health, in Togo, it's 10 times larger. Illicit outflows are 10 times larger than public spending on health. In Malawi, that's 2 times. So it's a global issue. It really hits Africa hard, though.
Now, Joseph, do you foresee maybe an attitude change with nations holding their multinationals accountable?
So, I mean, we did see some progress at the Financing for Development conference in Addis Abbaba last week. In that, all of the nations committed to significantly, or I should say substantially, reduce illicit financial flows by 2030. So that is a step forward.
Some multinationals have come out and sort of apportioned the blame to corrupt government officials. What is the situation there? Is this a fair accusation?
Corrupt government officials are, of course, some component of it, but primarily what we've noticed is that a lot of it is commercial. So it's not purely just government corruption.
Joseph, let's talk about respective countries who house companies that are beneficiaries of illicit monies. Should they not be held accountable?
I would say that anyone who's breaking laws should be held accountable to them breaking the laws, whether that's a company or an individual in a company. That's a personal opinion, but I think that if somebody breaks the law, they should be held accountable for it.
Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. And that was Joseph Spanjers, an economist at Global Financial Integrity in Washington, D.C. in the United States.